Well, hello, everybody. This is Roger Durling, Executive Director of the Santa Barbara International Film Festival, and I'm so delighted to have with us today Brad Hall and Julia Louis-Dreyfus. Brad wrote and directed this incredible short that I was telling them it remains one of my favorite shorts that we've ever showcased at the Santa Barbara Film Festival in 2012. Picture Paris. And before we start the conversation, I want to show you guys the trailer for the short.
La pluie ne cesse de tomber, viens plus près, mamie. Si l'orage te fait trembler, viens plus près, mamie. Le vent qui chasse du ciel lourd, les nuages gris, ne peut rien contre mon amour. Et toute la nuit, viens plus près de mon cœur, là, tout contre moi. Et si l'orage te fait peur, dors entre mes bras. Je t'embrasserai, te parlerai, t'apporterai le réconfort. Allez, 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 viens. Nous resterons là seuls ici-bas que toi et moi, corps contre corps. Allez, viens. Allez, 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 viens. Allez, 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 viens. Allez, viens.
Welcome.
I totally forgot we had a trailer.
Me too.
Yeah, and I love the fact that it doesn't show the big twist in the short. Brad, tell us, how did this idea come about?
Well, it came right out of our lives. Our oldest kid was going to college, and we were those terrible parents that we hate so much that we're hovering and worrying, and the empty nest was scaring the shit out of us. And as a kind of a joke, really, I wrote this script, and with everything in it pretty much that wound up in the short, close to it anyway, and showed it to Julia, and it was really just for her, and then to sort of comment on our own predicament. And she said, why don't we just go make this? And wow. And then we just did. So it turned out to be a great little stroke of fancy.
But when you were writing it, it was always with Julia in mind?
Oh yeah. This is very much based on our love of Paris and our distress at our kid going off to college.
Now, Julia, you have family in France, right? And what is it about Paris that so many of us dream about so much?
Well, this is a 5-hour interview, right?
Yeah, of course. Yes. And Brad leaves.
Brad leaves. No, he's closing the door to his office.
Yeah. No worries.
Yes, my father was born in Paris, as a matter of fact, and lived there and until he moved to the States when he was roughly 7 during the war, as a matter of fact. And then, but his father, my grandfather, remained in France and flew for the Free French during the Resistance. And I have a lot of family there, although admittedly I don't know them all particularly well, but they are there. I definitely personally feel a connection to France because of my father, who obviously spoke fluent French. He was bilingual, and additionally, so it reminds me of my dad for sure. And I also I don't know, I get a kick out of the French. I think they're kind of grumbly and irritated with you, which amuses me no end. And from a style and aesthetic point of view, in my view, there is nothing that surpasses the French and France and Paris specifically for beauty. And it is in fact a very romantic place and a lovely city all in. And we had a ball shooting there with a French crew for the most part. It was just so much, it had a dreamy quality to the project itself. The making of it was sort of dreamlike.
Yeah, Brad, I mentioned before we came on board that that the film has all this hidden complexities, which in a short, it is hard to do a lot of stuff but you handle it with flying colors. Can you tell us about writing it and handling the complexities of the short?
Yeah, well, I'm so glad that you like that part of it. I mean, it was sort of, the way we sort of approached it was that we set up a lot of things and then knock them down as you go along, so that there were always two things going on. There's always a little bit of comments on what you're doing and then what you're doing. And so it's a little bit of a tricky tone, but at that point, you know, Julia hadn't yet done, she did this movie Enough Said with James Gandolfini,
which is amazing. I love that film.
And the audience gets to see Julia do a lot of stuff that they weren't familiar with, maybe from the comedy work that she does, but I was aware of the range that Julia has, and I wanted to do something where she could be both really funny and really sad at the exact same time, because when our kid left for college, we had these gigantic emotions, these huge feelings, and that was sort of what the movie was really always about, these sort of operatic feelings which if we step back was kind of funny to us, that we were so overwhelmed by what is just regular life. Your kids move on, of course. So it was the intention was always to try to play two things at once, which is tricky, but we had a narrator, which really helps and sets the tone. And we had Julia's performance, which going in was always going to be super truthful. And I think if two things really are going on at once and you're super truthful, voila, you're playing two things at once. So you can't really think about, oh, I'm going to play two things at once. You just play what's happening, and if that's a complicated situation, that's what happens. Then you capture that on film. And so we got lucky there to have Julia agree to do.
Yeah, and Julia, following up what Brad said about playing in two realities, was that hard for you? Or do you just, as Brad mentioned, you just played each scene for, the reality of it?
I'm going to admit it wasn't hard for me. That's my approach usually anyway. And I think maybe that's how maybe, God willing, that's how I get away with doing sometimes very broad comedy. It's got to come from a really grounded, truthful place. And so so it's a balancing act all the time, but as an actor, you're just always trying to be authentic and as real as possible, even in the most unreal of circumstances. And I think then you can that can help sell outrageous material.
Mm-hmm. Going back to I don't want to spoil to those who are listening and have not seen the short just yet. There is a big twist in the middle of the storyline. Brad, is that something that how did it come about in the writing? Or from the get-go?
That was the first thing, I think. I think that because I was kidding around about these operatic things, these sort of Shakespearean things, and that the twist and the way that it sort of develops strikes me as being a comic Shakespearean sort of thing. I don't know how far you want to go with ruining what happens, but when these big things happen, they happen in people's lives. They really happen, and the emotional part of it. And so to have that push you into a little bit of a surreal or a little bit of an over-the-top kind of idea was always a part of it, because we always thought, we're behaving so ridiculously with our kid going off to college. What's the most ridiculous thing that could happen believably? And that's what it was.
And you make this great choice that you mentioned earlier, the narrator, the fact that he actually is speaking in French with subtitles, and eventually he becomes a character in the story. Yeah. Was that always part of the structure?
Always. I love that. And well, Eric Almosnino, who we were so lucky. It's funny you mentioned shorts, because in Europe, shorts are a very different thing than they are here. He's a really big actor in France.
Yeah.
And we didn't know him. And we had a little contact with him through Julie Snyder, who produced this with us. She had a little contact with him. And what he wanted to do, we couldn't even believe it. Like, we're getting Eric Almosnino? You got to be kidding. And
Yeah, and he had
but
just come off of playing
there's
what-
Gainsbourg.
exactly.
He was in Gainsbourg. He just won the César, the French
Right.
Academy Award.
Yeah.
But what's funny about the narration was I'd always thought, okay, can an audience put up with the subtitle in a short film? But yeah, maybe. But the first time that I recorded it with him, I recorded it in English, and because it was easier for me to write the English, obviously. So I wrote the narration in English. And when I tried to record it with him in somebody's bedroom in France, well, which is kind of the way that they shoot, we had a very small budget, so I was just trying to grab practically on an iPhone, and it just didn't work because his English is not that great. And so he was really struggling. He would go very slowly because it was so hard for him. So I thought, screw it, let's just do it in French. And then, so I had a cousin of mine is a French speaker, lived in Paris for many years. So he helped me sort of translate it. And then he read that and go, this is ridiculous. It sounds like American. So then he translated it, and Deborah Mazer, who was our French producer, she helped her English was great. And so I could say to her, hey, let's get this idiomatic. And because I really love what a narrator can do, especially in a short, because you can jump forward so fast. There's no exposition, there's no nothing. You just get right to the point because the narrator can just help you through it. So no character is forced to blah, blah, pipe on screen. So that, I didn't want to burden Julia with that. So the French narrator can do that. And it's such a fabulous thing in French films that I love, that it felt like, if we're going to go to France and make a movie, let's make it a French movie. And so that was part of, that's the third thing we were always playing. It's like, oh, if this is a French movie, it'll look like this. So that's where the narrator came from.
One of my favorite parts of the piece is the date from hell with Jeff Barry. Julia, what was it like working with Jeff in that scene?
Well, it was delightful because we're friends with Jeff and his wonderful wife Linda, because from Chicago days, we were doing theater when Steppenwolf and our theater company was all happening all at once. And so, I mean, our theater company played softball against their theater company. So we were very connected. And frankly, it was an opportunity for us to go on a work vacation with our good friends. So it was an absolute gas. I mean, as soon as we would wrap on a day, we'd all go out and eat somewhere fabulous and get ice cream on the Ile Saint-Louis or whatever. I mean, it was, again, it had a fantastical feeling to it. And Jeff is my God, he is the most stellar actor, almost that I've ever worked with. And the fact that he pulled off that goofy, horrible guy so seamlessly, it was just because he's so not that kind of person. He's a wonderful human being.
There's a moment, remember, Jules, when he slips, he's in the doorway.
Yeah.
And we had quite a complicated shot. We didn't have a lot of super complicated shots because our budget was so small, but this was a complicated shot, and it was handheld and backing up. And I remember I was kind of holding the camera, Beef Cox, who was our director of photography, kind of pulling him back and into the room while he's shooting the shot of Jules and Jeff Perry. And Jeff Perry kind of slips. And it was so it was such an incredible moment. And then it turned out, of course, he planned it all along. And he did it over and over and over again. He kept slipping, and it's in the movie. It's such a great little tiny thing. He's incredible.
Yeah. Speaking of the look of the film, Brad, you create this stark contrast between the American world and the Paris, and tell us about achieving that contrast.
Well, it was pretty easy to do because when you're in Southern California and everything's brown and yellow, and then you go to Paris and everything is blue and red, and it pretty much takes care of itself. But the beginning of the movie is in Los Angeles. It played for Glendale, and we were actually shooting in Woodland Hills at a friend's house, and which was perfect because the palette was really, really sort of one color. And then we get to France, And the intention there was that Brandon Cox and I came up with was because we can't afford Steadicam, we can't afford a lot of equipment or any cranes or anything. So we had these little sliders, like a little sort of a 4-foot slider, so that pretty much every shot in the movie can move just a little bit. And you buy a lot of, when you're in Paris, you're already getting a lot of bang for your buck. But if you just move the camera just a little bit, it always feels, you're being reminded that you're watching a movie in a funny way, but it also has a little bit of a dreaminess to it. And so that's what we did. And it really worked well. And I would do it again on a big movie, because it's just moving that camera just a little bit can be a very effective thing.
Although we really were on a very tight budget, and there were certain things that we kind of had to surreptitiously get, which included when we were on the Baton Mouche or whatever, Rouge or whatever the hell it's called.
Yeah, Baton Mouche.
Right. And we couldn't afford to take over one of them. So we pretended, Brad and I pretended that we were going with a friend who had a camera because we were going to renew our vows. And so we did, and we snuck on and shot that little vignette on the boat as we were moving along. Yeah, and we were hiding, like hair and makeup came along with us, and they were kind of hidden in like raincoats and pretending not to be with us, and then would come and do a touch up and then quickly leave so people wouldn't notice. And I mean, it was a real spy operation.
It was, and then it started to rain just a little bit, remember, on the boat.
Yeah, which was fabulous.
Beautiful shots where Julia has an umbrella, and a lot of it didn't get into the movie, but it was so beautiful. And the light, it's such a funny thing that every city has its light, and there's a certain kind of light in Los Angeles that I just love, winter light particularly. But man, Paris, no matter what the weather, we had some rain, and the light was so incredible.
Good. Yeah.
And we were doing practical light so much, because you can get a permit, whereas if you keep your crew under 20 people or something, I can't remember the number, but small, if you keep your crew really small, you can shoot anywhere in Paris on the street if you don't control the street, and you don't shoot any buildings that were built after 1970. Because if it's 70 is the cutoff, you have to pay the architect. Before 70, isn't that weird? So they'll let you shoot. So we shot, at the IMP at the Louvre, we shot all these incredible places for free, for nothing, just because we would go at the right time. And Julie would hop out of the van, and we'd, grab the camera, and Brandon would roll camera, and we'd grab a few shots. And so that's why there's a big montage in the middle of the movie that's bigger than it was planned to be, because we had all this fabulous footage of Julia running around famous places. So it turned out to be really, really fun.
And one of the pivotal scenes takes place in the Luxembourg Gardens, which is, I love that scene, and it looks so beautiful. How did you guys zero in on the Luxembourg Gardens?
Well, Jules, you remember this? That shot around the fountain. There's two shots in the Luxembourg Gardens. One is that you might not even know is the Luxembourg Gardens unless you're really familiar with it. There's a fountain that's kind of in the corner of the Luxembourg Garden, and we planned to shoot there. And we had an okay, because our French producer knew this person and that person. And we knew it was going to be a little bit difficult, but we thought we could shoot there. So I was riding one of those Velibs over to the set, and I get a phone call saying the gendarmes are here. We got a problem. We're not going to be able to shoot. So I got there. We got a couple of people to talk to one of the gendarmes, and we just started rolling cameras. We just shot it. And we got that scene. And then the gendarmes were like, you got to get out of here. You can't shoot your next scene where you want to. And so one of our French-speaking crew people said, well, what are we supposed to do? I mean, come on, we've got things to shoot. And the gendarme goes, shoot. We got this a lot, in France. And he said, shoot, that's what you're going to shoot, but you can't shoot here. You can shoot anywhere else. And we went, anywhere? He goes, anywhere else you like. So we moved to where that picnic shot is. If you're really familiar with the movie, there's a shot of them having a picnic with the Senate behind them. This is a place you are not allowed to shoot if you have $100 million budget. This is really forbidden. And we only got to shoot there because they thought they were scolding us. And guys on the crew had tried to shoot a big commercial, a Honda commercial. They kicked us out, last week. So we got over and over. We got
Yeah. So Julia, what is it like working with Brad as your director?
I mean, we have a shorthand with one another. Needless to say, we've been married a while. We've known each other a while, and we have similar taste. And I love working with Brad. I mean, he directed a bunch of episodes of Veep as well, and it's a good working relationship. There's no doubt about it. You know, I mean, I would say the only downside is that he can tell if I'm tense and I'm covering it up, and vice versa. And that can be, you know, that can add a little stress element, I guess you could say. But I do it again in a heartbeat, because it's really a thing of joy to be together and work.
Yeah. And Brad, how do you feel about directing Julia?
I would say exactly what Jules said, but I would add that, you know, for me, Julia's approach, her sort of physical approach is so great, because everything gets better. You know, if you write a scene and then Julia puts it on its feet, sometimes that's not a satisfying process and you really have to work through it with some actors, and you hope to get to a place, but Julia always is thinking ahead, and particularly just with props and business and how to relate to other actors in the scene. And in Picture Paris, particularly, there was a lot of stuff where she was alone and didn't have anybody to react with. And that can be very difficult. Where's your focus? What are you looking at? What is there's a very long shot where we push in on her, and it's in that little trailer, actually, you showed, and she starts to cry. That's a really hard thing I mean, it's deceptively difficult to do something like that and make it believable. But for Jules, that was first take perfect.
Although, full disclosure, that scene didn't, as I recall, is not in the film.
Yeah, it is. You bet.
Oh, it is?
No, that scene it is. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
There's a little bit of a scene. I'll tell you what's not in is that, remember, you came in with all your luggage.
Yeah.
And there's a little scene
in that apartment. Right.
Yeah, that's not in.
So was there any discussion about making it into a full feature picture?
We were just talking about this, and I've toyed around with that, and I'm sort of coming back to toying with it again now. So I have ideas of how it could work, but I haven't done it yet. So it ain't nothing till it's done.
Well, it's a fantastic story. I mean, I mentioned that I teach it, and it just plays so well.
I'm so glad. That's great.
And Roger, also, you should know that for us, you know, I mean, it was such a passion project for the two of us, and then to have it come to the Santa Barbara Film Festival was so meaningful to us, because this, you know, I mean, Brad was born and raised here. He's third generation Santa Barbarian, and I've been living here with him now for 30 plus years, and it was like coming home. And the fact that it was so accepted into the festival was incredibly meaningful to both of us, and holds a special place in our heart, just so you know.
It was. I remember we did it. We showed it at the Riviera at the end, when you do that fabulous free night.
Correct.
And
yeah.
I remember that it was getting laughs. It was so full, and it was getting laughs where we'd never gotten laughs before. And Julie and I were looking at each other going, how can this go this well? It's what Santa Barbara audiences.
Yeah. I remember that people laughed at the very first line, that is like Paris.
They got it,
people started laughing right away.
It's so satisfying when there's an audience that gets it. And particularly for us, because we did theater for so long before we ever thought about TV and movies and stuff. So we want that audience reaction and hope for it. And that was like a dream. It was so incredible. It's great.
Now, but directing wise, Brad, finding the tone where, you know, it starts, you know, very dreamy, and we think it's just going to be this romantic comedy, and then all of a sudden it makes a 180. Directing and editing, was it difficult to find the tone?
Well, it wasn't in the end, because Julia was on top of it, and that she's every frame of the movie just about. But the idea of sort of, you know, you subvert these things as you go along. So it's like you set up the relationship, you kill the relationship. You set up the dream, you kill the dream. You set up Paris, you kill Paris. And that's you know, the way that it goes along. So there was a structure, even though it's short. I think it's 28 minutes, something like that.
It's
That structure was, you know, we're familiar with things that length because we've done a lot of TV that's about that sort of in that area, and you can kind of tell. Even when I watch it now, I kind of wish that we trimmed the first third a little bit, but that's really the only sort of, when I watch it now, you know, a lot of times you watch stuff that you did a long time ago, you go, oh, what were we thinking? But with this, that's the only thing that I would really, I think, do is trim the beginning. It's funny though, we tried to do that at the time. And sometimes editing these things, especially shorts, is really hard. You try to get it down, get it down, get it down, get it down. And you're sort of you're a captive of how you're feeling at that moment. You know, since that time, we've done Veep, for example, in which we literally took out every breath. Nobody breathes in Veep. Everybody just talks. Nobody ever inhales. And so now, when I watch things, I have that in mind. I didn't have that in mind. So at the time, we felt like, okay, this is perfect. This is the best we can do. Now I look at it and kind of go, maybe there's things we can
No,
do.
but I think that snappiness from Veep would have been completely inappropriate for this picture.
Well,
I mean, because you had to luxuriate in the, particularly once we got to France, in the beauty of that. I think.
One of the fun things, Roger, in France was that the crew, we had a very skeleton crew, very small crew. And, but every department, the French guys and women were so expert at their job. That's not unusual. These guys, you know, you work with professionals all the time, but they love movies so much that you would get into these discussions with a grip or an electrician where their knowledge of American cinema is so extraordinary.
It's crazy.
And it's crazy, isn't it? I mean, they love movies. They love movies.
Yeah.
And that was part of the dream for us. We got there, and you know, like our sound guy and our driver, Jean-Paul Gerbal, who was our driver, this fucking guy knew more about Kubrick than anybody I've ever met. It was incredible. I love that about that part of the experience was wonderful.
Yeah, I never told you before that I lived in Paris. And between high school and college, I took a year off, and I lived in Paris for a year. And what I was blown away was so many art houses, you know, showing old films 24/7. I would actually get in trouble by not going to school sometimes because I was watching movies nonstop, you know, old movies and retrospectives. And it's
so
a great
Truffaut of you. That's what Truffaut did. All he did was watch movies. And so many of these, the French directors that you love were critics first. They were lovers of movies first. And I mean, it is amazing. The culture around cinema there is amazing. It's just amazing. So that was really fun. So
what are you working on now, Brett?
I've got a little movie I'm working on that came out of the pandemic. So we'll see where that goes. It's a rewrite of a redo of the last script that Buck Henry ever wrote, actually. So that's fun.
Oh, wow.
And some television projects, and Julia's in the middle of all sorts of things.
Yeah, I just read the news that you just got cast in a feature, Julia, right?
Yeah, I'm working. I made a few features of late. I was in London. I was making a film with A24 that'll be coming out, I guess, in a year and change. And I'm making a film with Jonah Hill and Eddie Murphy right now. So it's been kind of busy. Yeah, it's been pretty busy.
That's a good thing.
That's
a good thing. I love Enough Said. What a gem of a movie.
Thank you. Oh, it was so much fun. I'm making another film with Nicole, actually, this in February, it looks like. So I'm looking forward to doing that, to working with Nicole Holofcener, I should say, who directed and wrote Enough Said. So she's a dear friend and an incredible artist.
Yeah, she's one of my favorite directors. Is Catherine Keener going to be in this project also?
Oh, actually, I don't think so. There's not really a role for her, unfortunately, because I love Catherine. She's incredible. Yeah.
I mean, you and James had fantastic relationship in that movie, but the relationship you have with Catherine Keener in it is also terrific.
Thank you.
Terrific, terrific movie. Well, thank you guys. And for those who are listening, please check out their film, Picture Paris, it's actually available on Tubi. That's how I saw it recently. Yeah, so it is available.
Stuff too, right? I kind of forgot that it was on iTunes, but there it is.
Yeah, but for free on Tubi, you can you can watch it. But thank you. We love you guys here at the Santa Barbara Film Festival, both of you, and it was delightful to chat with you.
So
Thanks for chatting with us. That was really fun. Lovely to see you, and I hope our paths cross in person soon.
Absolutely. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.